Imagine this. You're standing on a stage. Maybe it's a literal stage, under the glare of spotlights, facing a sea of expectant faces. Or maybe it's the metaphorical stage of everyday life, a crucial meeting, a difficult conversation with someone you love, even just navigating the relentless currents of social media where everyone seems to be winning, thriving, perfect. The pressure is immense. You feel it in your chest, a tightening vice. Your mind races, scanning for potential threats, rehearsing your lines, calculating the precise angle of your smile, the exact modulation of your voice. The goal? To appear strong, unshakable, in control. You meticulously construct a fortress around yourself, brick by careful brick. Each brick is an achievement highlighted, an insecurity plastered over, a hesitation swallowed, a fear denied. You project an image of competence, of resilience, of having it all figured out. You are the architect of your own invincibility. And for a moment, it works. You feel a surge of something that feels like power. People nod, impressed. They might even envy you. You've successfully hidden the cracks, the doubts, the messy, uncertain parts of being human. You've presented the polished, impenetrable version of yourself. You've won the battle, haven't you? You've shown them your strength by masterfully concealing any hint of weakness. This is the narrative we've all absorbed, isn't it? Strength is the absence of vulnerability. It's the polished shield, the unyielding stance, the steady voice that never trembles. Weakness is the enemy, the flaw to be eradicated, the secret shame to be locked away in the deepest dungeon of the self. But linger in that feeling for a moment longer. Peer behind the impenetrable walls of your fortress. What's really there? Is it genuine, expansive strength? Or is it something else? A brittle tension, a gnawing anxiety about the cracks eventually showing? A profound, aching loneliness? The fortress you built to protect yourself. Has it inadvertently become your prison? You stand inside, safe perhaps, but utterly alone, disconnected from the very world you sought to impress, and maybe even disconnected from the truest parts of yourself. Here lies the unsettling paradox, the tremor beneath the surface of our conventional wisdom. What if this relentless pursuit of invulnerability, this constant performance of strength, is not building strength at all? What if it's actually making us weaker? What if the energy poured into maintaining the facade, into denying our fears and imperfections, is draining the very life force that constitutes real resilience? Could it be that the armor we wear to deflect blows also prevents warmth, connection, and genuine growth from reaching us? Think about it. When have you felt truly connected to another human being? Was it when they presented a flawless, curated version of themselves? Or was it in those rare, unexpected moments when the mask slipped? When they shared a struggle, admitted a fear, confessed uncertainty? Wasn't it their vulnerability, their willingness to show the cracks, that created the bridge between your heart and theirs? Didn't their imperfections somehow make them more real, more relatable, more human? And in that connection, wasn't there a shared strength discovered, far more potent than any solitary performance of perfection? So, what if we've got it all backwards? What if true strength isn't about building higher walls, but about having the courage to show up, authentically, cracks and all? What if the moments we perceive as our weakest, the trembling voice, the admission of "I don't know," the tears shed in frustration or grief, are not signs of failure, but doorways? Doorways to deeper connection, to profound self-awareness, and ultimately, to a kind of strength that is flexible, resilient, and deeply rooted in the messy, beautiful truth of our shared humanity? Why does the idea of showing our seams, our unfinished parts, feel so terrifyingly dangerous, like stepping off a cliff? What deep-seated fear drives us to cling so desperately to the illusion of the unblemished self, even when that illusion isolates and exhausts us? This drive to appear invincible, this primal terror of our own fragility. It's more than just a personal habit or a social pressure. It feels older, deeper, woven into the very fabric of how we understand ourselves and the world. Where does it truly come from? This instinct to hide the parts of us that need the most light. And what unseen price are we paying, individually and collectively, for upholding this carefully constructed, yet ultimately fragile illusion of perfect strength? The answer, it seems, lies buried deeper than we might initially suspect. But this fear wasn't just skin deep. To really get why we build these walls, you have to dig way down into the messy workings of our own minds and the ideas that have shaped us for centuries. So, where does it come from? This deep, almost primal urge to build walls, to project an image of flawless strength, even when it leaves us feeling hollowed out and alone inside that fortress. It's not just a simple preference or a fleeting social trend. This aversion to vulnerability is tangled deep within the roots of our psychology, echoed in centuries of philosophical grappling, and reinforced by the very air we breathe in society. It's a complex knot, and untangling it means looking unflinchingly at some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Let's start with the guardian at the gate of your consciousness, your ego. In psychological terms, think of the ego as the manager of your identity, the part of you that strives for coherence, control, and a positive self-image. It's the face you present to the world, the carefully curated I that navigates daily life. Vulnerability, by its very nature, threatens the ego's carefully constructed narrative. Admitting weakness, showing fear, revealing imperfection. These things destabilize the image the ego works so hard to maintain. It feels like losing control, like exposing the messy, unpredictable reality behind the polished mask. But there's a deeper layer here, something the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called the shadow. Your shadow contains all the parts of yourself that your conscious ego rejects or denies. The insecurities, the fears, the unacceptable impulses, the perceived flaws. It's everything you've learned to be ashamed of, everything you try to hide, not just from others, but often from yourself. Our terror of vulnerability is, in many ways, a terror of our own shadow being dragged into the light. We fear that if people see our cracks, they'll see the darkness we've repressed, the inadequacy we desperately try to disown. Building the fortress of invulnerability is an attempt to keep the shadow locked firmly in the basement of the psyche. But here's the kicker. Suppressing the shadow doesn't make it go away. It festers. It takes immense psychic energy to keep it contained, energy that could be used for growth, connection, and genuine living. The more we deny our shadow, the more power it exerts over us, often erupting in unexpected ways, projection onto others, sudden bursts of anger, or inexplicable self-sabotage. The fear of vulnerability becomes a fear of self-integration. Philosophically, this fear taps into profound existential anxieties. Think about Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of the gaze of the other. He argued that the moment we become aware of being watched, judged, or perceived by another person, our subjective freedom feels threatened. We risk becoming an object in their world, defined by their assessment. Showing vulnerability feels like handing someone else the power to define us, to label us as weak, needy, or incompetent. We fear their judgment will solidify our own deepest insecurities about ourselves, confirming our lack of worth in the vast, often indifferent universe. This connects perhaps to Friedrich Nietzsche's will to power, that fundamental drive within us to assert our strength, to overcome obstacles, to impose our will upon the world and create meaning. Our modern obsession with appearing invulnerable could be seen as a distorted, fear-based manifestation of this will. Instead of embracing the struggle and growth inherent in life, including its painful, vulnerable aspects, as Nietzsche might suggest, we attempt a shortcut, appearing powerful by denying anything that looks like weakness. It's a desperate grab for control in a world that often feels chaotic and uncontrollable. a way to stave off the terrifying possibility of meaninglessness or powerlessness. Showing vulnerability in this light feels like surrender, like admitting defeat to the forces we are trying so hard to dominate. And society? Society pours gasoline on this fire. We live immersed in a culture that relentlessly sells us an ideal of perfection. Turn on any screen, scroll through any feed. You're bombarded with curated images of effortless success, flawless beauty, perpetual positivity. Achievement is lauded, while struggle is subtly or not so subtly shamed or ignored. We internalize these messages from a young age. Boys are often told not to cry, while girls are subtly steered away from expressing anger. Asking for help can feel like admitting failure. Sharing bad news can make you seem like a downer. We learn to equate stoicism not with resilience, acknowledging feelings without being overwhelmed, but with emotional suppression. Vulnerability becomes synonymous with liability. Think about the language we use: emotional baggage, weak link, falling apart. It all frames vulnerability as something broken, burdensome, and undesirable. These cultural scripts run deep, shaping our automatic responses and reinforcing the ego's desire to hide anything that doesn't fit the acceptable mold. The cumulative effect of these psychological, philosophical, and societal forces shapes everything: how you behave, what you allow yourself to feel, even who you believe yourself to be. You might find yourself avoiding situations where you might fail or look foolish, sticking to your comfort zone even when it feels stagnant. Your relationships might remain pleasant but lack depth, because true intimacy requires a level of openness you're too afraid to risk. You might struggle to ask for help even when you're drowning, believing you should be able to handle it all yourself. Perfectionism might become your taskmaster, or its twin, procrastination, might paralyze you with the fear of producing anything less than flawless. Emotionally, you might live with a low hum of anxiety, the constant vigilance required to maintain the facade. You might find it hard to access deep joy because the pathways to intense positive emotions are often right next to the pathways for pain and vulnerability. Numb one, and you tend to numb the other. Grief, sadness, disappointment might get pushed down, only to fester into a vague sense of emptiness or chronic irritability. And your very identity can become fragile, overly dependent on external validation, promotions, praise, likes, because your intrinsic self-worth feels shaky, contingent on never letting the mask slip. You might even feel like an imposter, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to finally see that you're not as strong or capable as you pretend to be. This internal split, the gap between the performed self and the authentic self, isn't just uncomfortable. It's a source of profound internal conflict. It's exhausting. And the constant effort to deny or hide parts of our own humanity doesn't just prevent connection, it actively stunts our growth. But the cost doesn't stop there. This deeply ingrained fear of vulnerability, this relentless performance of strength, has consequences that ripple outwards, shaping our reality in ways we rarely perceive, creating hidden fragilities just beneath the surface of our lives. What happens when life, inevitably, throws something at us that the fortress simply cannot withstand? What is the true unseen toll of this pervasive denial? Okay, so it messes with our heads and ties our emotions in knots. But the real kicker? This fear doesn't just stay locked inside. It quietly starts sabotaging our lives, our health, even our reality, in ways we almost never see coming. All right, so we've peered into the psychological basement where the shadow lurks. We've wrestled with the existential dread of judgment, and we've acknowledged the societal megaphone blasting demands for perfection. We know maintaining that fortress of invulnerability is exhausting, that it creates an internal split, a disconnect from our own authentic selves. But the impact doesn't just stay neatly contained within your own head or heart. Oh no. This fear of vulnerability, this relentless performance of strength, bleeds outwards, silently shaping your reality, subtly poisoning your interactions, and constructing an invisible cage around your life in ways you might not even realize. It's like a hidden current pulling you off course, and the consequences are far more pervasive than just feeling a bit stressed or lonely. Our own minds often conspire against us here, thanks to some sneaky cognitive biases. Ever notice how, when you're terrified of looking weak, you seem to find evidence everywhere that confirms your fears? Someone frowns during your presentation, and you know it's because they saw your nervousness. You share a small struggle, and the conversation shifts awkwardly. Proof positive that vulnerability repels people. That's confirmation bias at work. Your brain, already primed to see vulnerability as dangerous, selectively filters reality to validate that belief, conveniently ignoring all the times openness did lead to connection or support. Then there's the spotlight effect, that nagging feeling that everyone is intensely focused on your flaws. You trip slightly, and you're convinced the entire room noticed and judged you harshly. In reality, most people are too wrapped up in their own anxieties, probably amplified by their own spotlight effect, to pay that much attention. But this bias keeps the pressure dial cranked high, making you hypervigilant about hiding any imperfection. Add to this the fundamental attribution error. We tend to blame our own slip-ups on circumstances. The traffic made me late. But attribute others' similar slip-ups to their character. They're just irresponsible. This societal tendency makes us terrified of showing weakness, because we instinctively fear others will make harsh character judgments about us, rather than seeing the situational pressures or human struggles behind our actions. Neurologically, your brain actually learns to fear openness. If you've had past experiences where vulnerability was met with shame, ridicule, or rejection, and let's face it, who hasn't? Your amygdala, the brain's little threat detector, can get conditioned. It starts treating situations requiring emotional exposure as genuine threats, triggering that familiar fight-flight-freeze response. Your heart pounds, your throat tightens, your mind goes blank. All because you considered asking for help or admitting you're overwhelmed. It feels like a survival instinct because, on a neurological level, your brain is screaming danger. Furthermore, thanks to neuroplasticity, the more you practice avoidance, the more you suppress emotions, dodge difficult conversations, and hide your struggles, the stronger those neural pathways for avoidance become. Your brain literally gets better and better at walling itself off. Conversely, the pathways associated with emotional expression, empathy, and connection can weaken from disuse, like unexercised muscles. And let's not forget the physical toll. Living in a state of constant vigilance, always managing the facade, perpetually bracing for judgment, that takes a toll. It keeps your body simmering in a low-grade stress response, marinating in cortisol. We know what chronic stress does. It weakens the immune system, messes with digestion, increases the risk of heart disease, disrupts sleep, fogs thinking. Your psychological defense mechanism becomes a direct threat to your physical well-being. Culturally, this fear becomes contagious. Think about the environments you inhabit. A workplace where mistakes are punished harshly and asking for help is seen as incompetence breeds a culture of silence and CYA. Cover your assets. People learn to hide problems until they explode. Compare that to a place where leaders openly admit their own uncertainties or mistakes. It grants permission for others to do the same, fostering collaboration and genuine problem-solving. Families, friendships, online communities, they all develop norms around vulnerability. If the dominant culture is one of mocking sensitivity or rewarding stoic posturing, individuals will adapt, reinforcing the collective avoidance. Media narratives constantly feed this cycle, glorifying the stoic hero who toughs it out alone, while characters who express vulnerability are often depicted as weak, unstable, or burdensome. Even economic pressures play a role. In hyper-competitive fields, the pressure to appear constantly productive, confident, and unfazed can feel overwhelming, making vulnerability seem like a career liability. So we keep the armor on, believing it's the pragmatic choice for survival, even if it feels soul-crushing. This is the unseen trap. It's not just one thing, it's this interlocking system of psychological biases, neurological conditioning, and cultural reinforcement, all pushing us towards the same defensive posture. And the cumulative consequence? A life lived smaller. Opportunities for deep, meaningful connection are missed because intimacy requires the very openness we fear. Personal growth stalls because real learning often involves admitting ignorance, trying things we might fail at, and asking for guidance. All acts of vulnerability. We might find ourselves increasingly isolated, even when surrounded by people, because nobody truly knows us behind the mask. Empathy erodes, both for ourselves and others. It's hard to connect with the struggles of others when we're busy denying our own. At a societal level, this fear contributes to polarization. It's easier to demonize the other side when we can't see or connect with their underlying fears, hopes, and vulnerabilities, or our own. We become brittle, individually and collectively, lacking the flexibility and resilience that comes from acknowledging and integrating our whole selves, weaknesses included. The fortress keeps us safe, but starves us of the very things that make life rich, meaningful, and ultimately strong. It's an unsustainable state. The pressure builds. Life, with its inevitable challenges, losses, and uncertainties, keeps knocking at the gates. The facade requires ever more energy to maintain, and eventually, cracks will appear. The carefully constructed image shatters. The energy runs out. You're left feeling exposed, exhausted, and maybe even ashamed that you couldn't uphold the impossible standard. You can feel the prison bars, sense the constant drain, see the unseen costs piling up around you like overdue bills. But the thought of simply dropping the armor, of stepping out defenseless, feels terrifying. How do you even begin to dismantle a fortress you've spent a lifetime meticulously building, especially when the world outside seems to reward invulnerability and punish weakness? Is the only answer to build thicker walls, stronger defenses? Or what if the escape route isn't about finding a safer fortress, but about questioning the need for walls altogether? What if the real rebellion lies somewhere completely unexpected, trapped, exhausted, paying a price we didn't sign up for? It feels pretty bleak, right? But what if the escape route isn't about building better walls? What if breaking free requires a kind of rebellion, a radical shift nobody ever told you was possible? You're standing there, feeling the cold weight of the armor, sensing the unseen bars of the cage built by fear, psychology, and society. The exhaustion is real. The isolation bites. The question echoes. How do you possibly dismantle a fortress you've spent a lifetime constructing, brick by painful brick? What if, as we just touched upon, the escape route isn't about frantically searching for a new, safer fortress, but about something far more radical? What if the true rebellion begins the moment you dare to question the need for walls at all? This isn't about finding a loophole in the system. It's about starting a revolution within yourself. The first, most fundamental act of this revolution is a radical shift in perspective, a complete redefinition of what strength actually is. Forget the image of the impenetrable shield, the stoic, unyielding statue. That's brittleness masquerading as power. Think instead of bamboo in the wind, it bends, it yields, it shows its flexibility, and in doing so, it endures storms that would shatter rigid oak. True strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's the courage to acknowledge it, to integrate it, to engage with life from that place of authenticity. It's the willingness to be seen, truly seen, without the suffocating layers of performance. This feels terrifyingly counterintuitive, precisely because it cuts against the grain of everything we've been conditioned to believe. But this counter-narrative holds the key to unlocking the cage. So how do you cultivate this paradoxical strength? The solutions are as counterintuitive as the premise. First, you must consciously embrace imperfection. Look to the Japanese philosophies of wabi-sabi, which finds profound beauty in the imperfect, the impermanent, the incomplete. Or kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The kintsugi master doesn't try to hide the cracks. They illuminate them, making the breaks part of the object's history, a testament to its resilience. What if you started seeing your own cracks, your past failures, your current struggles, your insecurities, not as shameful defects to be hidden, but as golden seams? Evidence of a life lived, lessons learned, resilience earned? This isn't about suddenly loving your flaws. It's about shifting your perspective from chasing an impossible, sterile perfection to appreciating the textured, complex, and ultimately more beautiful reality of your own imperfect existence. The second counterintuitive move? Recognize vulnerability not as a liability, but as a potential superpower. Think about it. What builds trust faster than anything else? It's rarely displays of flawless competence. More often, it's a moment of shared humanity, an appropriate disclosure of struggle or uncertainty. When someone lets their guard down with you, it signals trust, it invites empathy, it creates an immediate bond. That flawless facade you've worked so hard on. It might impress, but it often keeps people at arm's length, breeding suspicion. What are they hiding? Researcher Brené Brown's work powerfully demonstrates this. Vulnerability is the birthplace of connection, intimacy, trust, love, belonging, creativity, innovation, and change. All the things we crave most deeply require the courage to show up and be seen when we cannot control the outcome. Hiding your vulnerability doesn't just isolate you, it cuts you off from the very source code of meaningful human experience and creative breakthrough. This rebellion requires cultivating new mindsets. The first is prioritizing courage over comfort. Let's be clear, choosing vulnerability rarely feels comfortable or safe, especially at first. Your ingrained threat response will likely scream bloody murder. The revolution lies in feeling that fear, acknowledging it, and choosing to act anyway, guided by your values like connection, authenticity, or growth, rather than by fear's demand for safety at all costs. It's about willingly stepping out of the suffocating comfort of the fortress, even though the open air feels exposed. As Viktor Frankl observed, meaning often emerges not from avoiding difficulty, but from our response to it. Embracing vulnerability is embracing the full spectrum of human experience, finding strength through navigating the messy realities, not by denying them. The second crucial mindset is self-compassion. If the fear of vulnerability is fueled by the terror of judgment from others and yourself, then self-compassion is the antidote. Pioneered by researchers like Kristen Neff, self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding you would naturally offer a dear friend who was struggling. When you stumble, when you feel weak, when the old fears surface instead of beating yourself up, which just reinforces the belief that vulnerability is shameful, you offer yourself warmth and understanding. You acknowledge that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. Everyone struggles. And you practice mindfulness, observing your difficult feelings without being consumed by them. This internal kindness creates a secure base within yourself, making the prospect of external vulnerability feel less threatening. You become your own safe harbor. Think of the scientist who risks ridicule by admitting, "I don't know," or "my theory was wrong," thereby opening the door for collaboration and new discoveries. Think of the artist who channels personal pain into their work, creating something raw and resonant that touches countless others. Think of the leader who admits a mistake or expresses uncertainty, fostering psychological safety and unlocking the collective intelligence of their team. History is filled with figures whose perceived weaknesses or struggles, Abraham Lincoln's deep melancholy, Winston Churchill's black dog of depression, existed alongside their immense strength and impact. Their humanity didn't detract. It arguably fueled their resilience and connected them more deeply to the people they led. Breaking free isn't a single dramatic jailbreak. It's a series of small, courageous acts of rebellion. It's choosing to share a feeling instead of suppressing it. It's asking for help instead of struggling alone. It's admitting you don't have the answer. It's offering an apology without caveats. Each time you choose authenticity over armor, you weaken the old conditioning and strengthen the neural pathways of courage and connection. You are reclaiming your agency, consciously choosing how you want to show up in the world. You start to feel a different kind of power building, not the brittle power of control, but the resilient power of authenticity. This rebellion against the tyranny of perfection, this radical embrace of the whole, imperfect self. It feels revolutionary because it is. And it does more than just improve your life or relationships. It points towards something even deeper, a fundamental truth about reality itself, waiting just beyond the horizon of this struggle. Choosing courage, embracing the cracks, it starts to change everything. But this rebellion isn't just about feeling better or connecting more. Turns out stepping into vulnerability unlocks a door to the biggest secret of all, a truth about reality that could flip the whole script. So, you've embarked on the rebellion. You've started questioning the fortress, experimenting with embracing imperfection, maybe even finding a strange power in letting the mask slip. Just a little. You've tasted the counterintuitive freedom that comes from choosing courage over the cold comfort of the familiar cage. But where does this path ultimately lead? What's the final destination, the deepest revelation waiting at the heart of this journey into vulnerability? It's more profound than simply feeling better or having closer relationships, as vital as those are. The ultimate truth that vulnerability unlocks is a fundamental shift in how you perceive reality itself. A realization so deep it reframes everything you thought you knew about strength, weakness, and your place in the universe. The great illusion, the lie upon which the entire fortress of invulnerability is built, is the illusion of separation. We construct our defenses because we feel like isolated units, fragile egos adrift in a potentially hostile world, needing to protect our turf, manage impressions, and hoard our resources. We fear exposure because we think our weaknesses, our pains, our shadows are uniquely ours. Shameful deviations from some imagined norm. But vulnerability, when you truly dare to step into it, shatters this illusion like glass. In that moment when you share an authentic struggle, when you admit fear, when you allow your genuine emotion to surface and be seen, something extraordinary happens. You don't just connect with that specific person in front of you, you touch something universal. Your specific personal pain resonates with the great ocean-deep thrum of human suffering. Your fear echoes the fears felt across millennia. Your fumbling attempt at connection mirrors the same yearning for belonging that beats in every human heart. The ultimate truth is this: your vulnerability is not the thing that isolates you. It's the thin place, the doorway, connecting your supposedly separate self to the vast, intricate web of shared humanity. Your deepest insecurities are not unique flaws. They are variations on universal themes. The shame you felt wasn't proof of your defectiveness. It was a painful symptom of believing you were alone in your imperfection. By daring to be vulnerable, you don't reveal your isolating weakness. You uncover your profound, undeniable connection to everyone and everything else that has ever struggled, hoped, failed, loved, or grieved. You step out of the lonely spotlight of the ego and into the shared experience of being alive. And here's an even deeper layer. This move towards vulnerability isn't just about aligning with humanity. It's about aligning with reality itself. Think about the nature of the universe. Is it static, perfect, unchanging, invulnerable? Absolutely not. It's a place of constant flux, emergence, entropy, mind-bending complexity, and breathtaking interdependence. Stars are born from collapsing nebulae. Planets are shaped by cosmic collisions. Ecosystems thrive on delicate balances and nutrient cycling. Life itself propagates through permeable cells, through birth and decay. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is inherently vulnerable, contingent, and interconnected. Your own body is a testament to this, requiring air, water, food, constantly exchanging matter and energy with its environment, susceptible to injury and illness. The relentless pursuit of personal invulnerability, therefore, is fundamentally at odds with the very fabric of existence. It's an attempt to exempt yourself from the rules that govern everything else, a futile struggle against the natural, dynamic, vulnerable flow of life. The constant tension you felt inside the fortress? That wasn't just anxiety. It was the friction generated by pushing against the fundamental nature of reality. Look back now through this lens at the struggles we explored. The exhaustion of maintaining the facade. It was the energetic cost of resisting the truth of impermanence and interdependence. The loneliness behind the walls? It was the soul's deep ache for the connection that is our birthright, denied by the illusion of separation. The fear of judgment? It stemmed from mistaking our individual ego for our true identity, forgetting that our worth isn't contingent on a flawless performance, but inherent in our participation in the larger whole. The suffering wasn't punishment for being weak. It was the inevitable consequence of clinging to an illusion, of trying to be something other than what you, and everything else, truly are. Vulnerable, interconnected, and constantly becoming. This completely redefines strength one final time. True strength isn't about building higher walls or thicker armor. It isn't about controlling life's uncontrollable variables or achieving immunity from pain. Those are egoic fantasies. The ultimate strength, the only kind that holds up under the weight of real life, is the capacity to be with reality as it truly is, messy, uncertain, beautiful, painful, and completely interconnected. It's the resilience that comes not from denying vulnerability, but from accepting it as intrinsic to being alive. It's the courage to keep your heart open to experience both joy and sorrow without shutting down. It's the deep, quiet power that arises when you stop fighting reality and instead learn to move with it, drawing strength from your connection to the whole rather than trying to stand apart from it. This resonates with ancient wisdom across cultures, the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, effortless action flowing with the current. The Buddhist emphasis on acceptance and non-attachment, the Christian call to humility and love. They all point towards this same truth. Power is found not in dominance, but in surrender to something larger than the individual ego. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, flowing river. Behind you stands the cold, gray fortress you meticulously built. Safe, perhaps, but stagnant and silent. Before you flows the river of life itself, unpredictable, sometimes turbulent, carrying both debris and blossoms, reflecting both storm clouds and sunlight. Choosing vulnerability is choosing to leave the fortress behind. It's taking a breath and stepping into the current. It requires courage, yes. It means accepting you can't control the flow, that you will be tumbled and turned, that you will feel the cold and the warmth. But it also means you get to move. You get to feel the aliveness of the water, connect with other travelers floating alongside you, witness the ever-changing beauty of the landscape. You exchange the illusion of control for the reality of participation. The journey isn't about arriving at a place where vulnerability no longer feels scary. It's about learning to walk alongside the fear, recognizing it not as a stop sign, but as a companion indicating you're moving towards something that matters. It's a lifelong practice, not a final destination. So the question isn't, are you vulnerable enough? But rather, are you willing to be real? Are you willing to trade the brittle illusion of perfection for the resilient strength of authenticity? What walls are still standing in your life, perhaps unnoticed until now? What small, courageous step into the river can you take today, tomorrow? The fortress promises safety but offers only the slow death of isolation. The open, flowing river of vulnerability is uncertain, demanding, requires your whole heart. But it holds the breathtaking, terrifying, essential possibility of everything that truly matters. True strength was never about the armor you could build, but about the courage it takes to finally set it down. Ooh, deep waters, right? If exploring this felt important or sparked something for you, hitting that like button is a quiet nod of agreement. But let's not stop here. What's one takeaway sticking with you, or maybe one small act of courage this inspires? Drop it in the comments below. Let's keep this vital conversation going.